Hello, everyone. Hello there, and welcome to our final ALLi Alliance of Independent Authors member Q&A of 2021. I'm here with Michael La Ronn. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Orna. Happy end of 2021.
End of the year. Where did that year go, and what a year it was? So much to look back on, which we will be doing in the blog over the next little while. We'll be on the podcast between now and the new year. We'll be doing highlights of the year. So this is our last actual live event. So good to see we have a few people coming in to join us for that. And we have lots of questions as ever. This is our member Q&A where our members send us through their most pressing self-publishing questions, and anybody can listen to the answers because, you know, very often if one author is having an issue, it's something that applies to lots of other people as well. So you're the guy with the questions. What have we got this month?
Right. All right. Our first question is from Jenny, and she says that recently she acquired the rights to 2 traditionally published books that she wrote. They were published in the past, and the publisher gave her written confirmation that she is now the rights holder, so she succeeded in getting her rights reverted. However, the publisher still has the books for sale online. Her question is, whose responsibility is it to remove the books from sale, and how should she proceed?
She needs to nag them. It's their job. So things can happen with print books that put them outside of our control, unfortunately, on Amazon. So there's such a thing as third-party sellers who can actually purchase the books from the publisher and put them up for sale, and Amazon will take them. And there's not a lot of point in writing to Amazon about this. They won't take responsibility. The only person who can take the books down is the person who's put them up. And even then, that may not succeed. So, you know, this is a problem that comes up again and again and again for authors, and there's not an awful lot you can do beyond just requesting that the person who, as far as you know, put them up, takes them back down again. Your edition is the primary edition. So, you know, you're going to take it back. You're the publisher. You're the rights holder. You know, nobody else has the right to publish this book as far as you are concerned. You can make that point to Amazon, and over time these older editions will fall to, they never go away, and because a book that's been published on Amazon remains there, they see themselves as a cataloger as well as everything else. So it never goes away, but it kind of falls to the bottom of the heap so that it doesn't present itself as in as obvious a way as it is presenting now. So the advice would be, you know, try writing to the original publisher and asking them to remove. You can drop Amazon a note and say, I'm the rights holder, you know, this is the edition that I want to be sold. I don't want any other edition to be sold. See how you get on with that. And then the third thing is write more books and get on with your writing and publishing. Don't get stuck on this. One book syndrome is a much bigger problem for authors than having the wrong edition of a book up there. If you're doing your marketing and your promotion, yours is the one that's going to sell. And in that way, it becomes the one that's presented to people more often.
Yeah, that's such a good point. People that tend to worry about this the most are the ones with the fewer books, because when you have a search result, it's there. It just sticks out, right? But if you publish more books, then eventually this problem goes away, particularly if you've got a book that's showing up as out of print or something like that. So yeah, I think that's the answer, is just publish more books and try not to worry about it too much. But if the publisher has not fulfilled their part of the contract as they said they were going to do, I would definitely pursue that and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do.
Exactly. And actually, it's funny, just returning to the first point there, it's funny how often write more books and promote more is the answer to a lot of these
Yeah.
kinds of problems. So yeah, that can be a bit frustrating to hear if you're kind of really annoyed or feeling upset about a book being out there. But this is a long-term game, and you're best to keep a long-term kind of viewpoint, and that's what wins in the end.
Agree. Okay, our next question is from Maria Franklin. She says that I understand that ebooks can now be uploaded to the British Library. Is this also mandatory for us in KU? And do you know whether we would be in breach of the exclusivity clause by uploading our books to the British Library?
Okay, so yes, ebooks are now acceptable. It's a poorly kept secret. They're still asking for print books in lots of places on their website, but they will now. So what we're referring to here is in the UK, there are sort of libraries of record where you have a legal obligation as a publisher to submit your book to these 6 libraries of record. So it's the British Library manages it for the other libraries that are involved. And yes, publishing on KDP is publishing. So yes, you are expected to send it, and no, it does not breach your exclusivity. It's nothing to do with that. It's really libraries and you are not, you don't have to worry about it. And especially with this is a legal requirement. You're supposed to do it as a publisher, and Amazon can't get around that any more than you can. So just go ahead and do it, and be glad that we can now send out electronic copies, because we don't have the expense of 6 books by however many books you have for each library.
Mm-hmm. All right. And next question is from Rita, and she asks, what are the best methods for growing an email list?
Yes, well, that depends. That depends on what kind of book you're writing. So there are lots of ways to grow an email list, and it will vary if it's a poetry book, if it's a novel, or if it's a nonfiction book, your approaches can be different. So I think, though, the one that's common to all books, and the one that everybody should do, and the best one in this sense, that the reader is most primed to sign up, and that the reader is most likely to be your ideal reader, is that sign up at the back of your book. The one that captures them when they've just finished reading and they sign up from the back of your book. That is an engaged reader who likes what you've done, and because it's not just about growing your email list, it's about growing your email list with the right readers. So that's why some of the methods that are sometimes recommended for growing lists may not be all that effectual. So you might get more people on your list, which can make you feel good, but in terms of them being a list who will respond to your call to actions in future, which is buy your next book or become part of your review team or whatever. So I'm going to call out some. I'm sure Michael can add lots. But giving away something free is the time honored. Giving away something free that is allied to the kind of books you want to sell to those readers. So first, book in series is a very common giveaway for authors, or some other reader magnet that your reader is going to like to get, and that is, as I said, it's very important that it's allied to the kind of books you want to sell to those readers. And that's why a number of authors segregate their lists. It's not one giveaway for every kind of reader that you may have if you write across different genre, for example. For nonfiction people, you can do things like run a competition or do a quiz. Sometimes these kinds of things are more attractive and more attention getting than the straight giveaway. But again, being careful that you don't just get a lot of people who are, interested in the quiz, but not going to be interested in buying your book. So the quiz or whatever it is you're giving away should be quite reflective of the content of your book. Doing a swap with other authors whereby you can each sign up for each other's emails, that can be really effective. So they present you to their list, you present them to your list, and people sign up across perhaps give a dual giveaway, and people sign up across the two lists. Again, though, being really careful that it's an author who is very like yours and will appeal to your readers. That's a few kind of off the top of my head. Do you have any, Michael, to add to that?
Yeah, the ones you listed are good. I would say that having the right plugin on your website that presents your email offer to people to sign up is actually, I think it's underrated. There are some people don't like the idea of pop-ups, right? So somebody lands on your website for the first time, thing pops up, says, join my mailing list, get a free book. A lot of people in practice hate that, but it works. It really does work. And so having a good plugin that can do that is, like I said, I think it's underrated. I use, I forget which one I use. I think I used Bloom for a little while. That was by Elegant Themes. They're the same folks that make Divi, the theme Divi. There's lots of them out there. Just do your research on that. That's an effective way. Also, just making sure, I think Orna mentioned this, but including a link in the back of your book to sign up for your list. And if you can, I think this is where list management is kind of everything. So like people are always wanting to know, how do I grow my list? How do I grow my list? I think it's more important to answer the question, how do you take care of your list once you have a list? Because, for example, if you get, say, 1,000 people on your email list, but then you never email them, then it's as good as having maybe 200 people. Because if you go a year or 2 years without emailing them, they're going to be like, who is this person? Unsubscribe. So having good autoresponders, so these are automated sequences that first they should deliver your free book, but then over time you send messages that basically get people acquainted with you and your brand. So like if you were to sign up for my mailing list, I've got a series of autoresponders that goes out for like 7 weeks, each with a different topic that's kind of punchy, and each one has a call to action to kind of get you up to speed with who I am and what I'm doing and why I write, right? So, and then also combining that with contacting your readers on a regular basis. I'm kind of guilty of not doing that, but I have a pretty lengthy autoresponder sequence. But just make sure you're thinking about how you take care of people who are on your list, and then also think about ways that you can segment the people on your list. So like, for example, do you know if the people on your list are Amazon readers? Are they Kobo readers? Are they Apple readers? Anything you can do to kind of glean some data on that is important, so that when you have a book launch, you don't send a mass email, of Amazon links to people who aren't Amazon readers. So it's also, Orna hit the growing your list part, but the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize that growing your list is great, but if you can't maintain it, then it's almost pointless to have a list.
It's so true. And I'm really glad that you brought up that side of it. I think the other thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about the growing is advertising. There are a number of high-earning indie authors who have used Facebook ads to grow their list. And it's more challenging now than it used to be some years ago, but it's still very doable if you have a niche and clearly identified audience that is on Facebook. That can work very successfully. I think in the same spirit as Michael was saying about nurturing the list when you have it, it's you know, what I see authors do a lot is, you know, tell me how to grow my list, and then you have this kind of discussion where you give them options. I'll give a link in a moment, but you have this kind of discussion, but actually it's not a one-off thing. So if you wanted to, for example, use Facebook ads to grow your list, then you need to experiment with that over time. You need to see what kind of ads draw your particular readers in. So it's not a one-off thing. Oh, hey, I'll put up an ad and I'm going to get hundreds of subscribers over a few weeks, and then that's that sorted kind of thing. This is an ongoing, whatever you're doing to grow your list and whatever you're doing to nurture your list, you need to set time aside for that monthly, you know, so that it's an ongoing thing that's always going on. So the back of the book one and the one on your website, these kind of are auto, which is fantastic. They're working away for you. Set them up once and they're done. They're the best. But some of the other methods then are things that you will do periodically that you need to kind of sit on. We have two great people on email and list growing got together for ALLi some time ago, and Joe Friedlander, now deceased, but a great friend of ALLi in his time, and his advice is so evergreen that it still completely applies, in conversation with Nick Stevenson, who I think of as Mr. Email, Mr. Email List, and
Yes.
we'll put the link to that in the show notes. It's a podcast episode that's really well worth listening to, and that has lots and lots of ideas. But again, to labor the point, the idea is one thing, but the practice and the implementation of the process of list growing and list nurturing is a bigger thing. So the question is bigger than it sounds.
Agree. And Gwen Garfield Bennett asked a good question it's apropos to the topic. Any recommendations on the best email provider to use? I've been on MailChimp a while, but I'm thinking of switching to MailerLite.
Yeah, MailerLite is...
I can take this one if you want, Orna.
Oh yeah, I do. I'll just say the MailerLite is a good
go ahead.
option, and I use ConvertKit, which I love. Not the cheapest, but I find them great. But yeah, you go ahead there, Michael, because I know you've done lots of research on this.
Yeah, I would say MailerLite is fine. I use GetResponse. I love GetResponse. They just do some things that just make things really easy. MailChimp, like you said, MailChimp is kind of have a tarnished reputation at times, making some decisions that a lot of people don't like. Aweber is one. I think they're still around. That's kind of one of the original OGs of email newsletters. Trying to think. I think SendFox is another one that people use. You know, the one thing I would just say to be careful with email providers is, you know, there's a lot of email providers coming up, and it feels like sometimes it's a race to the bottom. Like everybody wants to offer the lowest prices, but then people kind of fall for that, and then they get in and they realize, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't have autoresponders. Oh, wait a minute, this doesn't have like a form you can put on your site so people can sign up easily. Like, just be careful, just be wary of that. Like I would compare them to the leading email providers. Don't just fall for price, because sometimes what they do is they get you hooked in, and then they're still building it. And as an author, you're a professional, and you really don't want to pay. You really don't want to pay to train an email service providing company. You want to try to get as many professional tools as you have available. And fortunately, they're not terribly expensive, but just beware of that, because I've seen, I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen providers in the past that offer, you know, rock bottom services, and everyone's like, oh, I got to switch there. And then if you read the fine print, oh no, they can't do autoresponders. If you can't do autoresponders, that's, you know, to me, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah, all but useless. And the other thing that can happen is the base cost seems good, but actually other things are add-ons. and they start adding on, or the cost is good when you've got a low list, but as soon as you actually start
Yep.
being successful. So plan for success. Don't plan for, when you're starting out. They can take big jumps. So when you're doing your price comparisons, take note of that. As I said, people talk about ConvertKit being very expensive. I find it worth every penny because they have fantastic templates. Everything is very easy and simple. They're constantly improving the platform, and they've got a load of extras there which you can decide to use or decide not to use. So I do recommend them, but I know it's not for everybody. And then fiddle around with them a bit. You can get acquainted with it as much as you can before you make a full annual commitment or anything like that.
All right, Ray has another question that is appropriate to the topic. What do you say in your emails? He struggles to know what to say in fiction emails to keep people reading.
Yeah, I think what fiction people love, once a reader likes a book, I think they like to know a bit about the background to the book, the setting of the book, the photographs and music, and things that appear in the book, things that inspired you as an author. I think readers tend to love that kind of thing. New chapters, extracts, character sketches. I think we can underestimate how interesting it is to be a writer if you think about it in that way. So that's one sort of approach that you can take. Any other ideas, Michael, for fiction?
Yeah, to me, the most important thing, for fiction, the most important thing for email, period. It doesn't matter whether it's fiction or nonfiction, but it's particularly important to fiction writers, is the actual visual look of the email. So what I see a lot of people do is they will just throw paragraphs, gigantic blocky paragraphs into an email. That doesn't work. The easiest way to do it is to break everything up. So what I do, and it's a trick that works really, really well for me. It gets me really good open rates, really good click rates, is I try to do only one sentence per paragraph, because psychologically what that does is it pulls the reader's eyes down the page, right? And then I use short sentences. And it sounds a little elementary, but you'd be amazed at how well that works. And if you're struggling to get people to read your emails, try that and see. And if you'll notice, that's what a lot of the email masters do. If you look at their emails have a certain visual look, and that look is almost always one sentence per paragraph, usually a bigger than normal font, like size 16, size 18, and they one sentence per paragraph, and it's usually pretty punchy. Try that. See what happens. And that works well for fiction. That has worked well for me and my fiction autoresponders and my newsletters as well.
Fantastic. And one final idea is, if you are blogging, is that you can send, you can actually just put a tiny bit about what it is you're talking about and then send them across to your blog, which hopefully, ideally, you also have a bookstore on your blog. So in other words, you can use your writing to tempt people in and get them over to your website if you think about it in a strategic sort of way. And I suppose that's the final point I would make here, is when you are thinking about what you want to put into an email, there are two things to consider. First of all, you should be enjoying yourself when you're writing to your readers. There's something paralyzing about it, because so many authors find that this is a task they don't get around to, or this is a task that fills them with dread. You have to in some way bring the spirit of the books into the email. Whatever is, making you sit there and write the book from start to finish, there's some core something in there that's really important to you. If you can find out for yourself what that is and transfer that over into your email. I notice that the authors who have really big email followings do this. So the email that arrives, Mike was talking about the visual look of the text. Think also about the visual colors. It should have sort of a visual feel of your book covers. They should get the same spirit and sense, because sometimes authors send emails that are completely different in tone and texture and visuals to the work, and that generally creates a sort of a discomfort, even if the reader doesn't understand why, or you don't understand why. That creates a sort of a discomfort. So think strategically about it. Number one, enjoy it yourself, and then number two, what will give them a bit of value. So, and finding the point where those two things meet will probably give you what you need to work on. It's a bit of a process, I think. Over time you see what people like, and keep an eye, as Michael says, on your open rates and your click rates, and you get a sense of, they liked that one more than that one. Not that you're going to just slavishly follow it, but you get a sense of it. So you're developing a relationship over time with this group of people who are very important to your business.
Yeah. And another thing too, it's more of a technological update, is open rates aren't what they used to be. And that's because email service providers like Apple Mail and Google Mail are now starting to get on the privacy bandwagon and not allow you to see the open rates for people on their platforms. So just be aware of that too. So just because your open rate might be low, it may not be as low as you think. So and I think Apple is in the process of doing that right now.
They are. And yeah.
So just be aware of that.
Email marketers the world over are crying.
Yes.
Yes. And anyone who relies on it. So yeah, but if you keep your focus on being entertaining, being awesome, being brilliant, just as much in that email as you are in your book, then you won't go too far wrong.
Exactly. All right. Our next question, just lost my question here. Okay, our next question is, can ALLi advise where members can look for templates for privacy and or GDPR policies for their websites?
Yeah, we haven't got an actual privacy template and GDPR template. We did have the GDPR template, I think. We had one made when all of that was going on, when it was introduced in the first instance. But a lot of now, and a lot of like WordPress provides its own, email providers provide their own, and the tech and tools that you are using yourself will give you, generally speaking, a template that you can adapt that suits their particular circumstances. So that seemed to be a better option for people. So we don't have it. So privacy policy and GDPR, if you've in the first instance look to your website provider, look to your email provider and see, they are very, very likely, if you're using any of the established ones, they are very, very likely to provide you with that, and you're best to use the one that's allied to the technology that you're actually using. If that isn't there or available to you, then look at authors who are in your own sphere and who are sending the kind of emails that you are sending, and have a look at theirs and use that as a template. So ALLi has its own. Obviously, all you have to do is click on our own one to see an organization one. Michael and I'm sure Michael has one, I have one. So you're best to look, though, as with everything, template wise and in every way, you're best to look at people who are working in a sphere similar to you. So, the policy that somebody who is in nonfiction may not be exactly the same, and somebody who has, say, a membership site on their, has reader members and different layers of membership, or different sets of circumstances, then their policy is not going to be perfect for you. So it's about getting one that's good for you. Do you have anything to add to this, Michael?
Yeah, I would say your level of risk depends, because when people want to do privacy policies, they want to do it because they want to comply with GDPR, or they feel that from a privacy and security perspective, they should include something like that on their site. And your exposure, to use an insurance term, goes up the more financial stuff you have on your website. So most authors are probably just going to have a email list on their website. They might have a digital store, right? If you are allowing people to sign up for accounts, or you're allowing credit card transactions or things like that through your website that is not through PayPal or Stripe, you're taking them directly, then you have a massive exposure and you absolutely need a privacy policy. I think everyone needs a privacy policy. I think it's good practice. But I would be more concerned if you're doing more complex stuff on your site. So everything that Orna mentioned for your average author, I think makes perfect sense. Just make sure you understand what you're putting in your privacy policy. Sometimes I'll see privacy policies that just don't make any sense. Like they'll say, like Orna said, they'll take something from something you saw in a casino privacy terms or privacy policy or something, just use a silly example, and it won't make any sense at all. So just make sure you understand what you're putting in your privacy policy, and then just make sure that you can abide by whatever you put in your privacy policy. Just keep in mind that 99% of people are never going to read your privacy policy anyway. But for those that do, just make sure it makes sense and you can abide by it.
Very true. And also, don't, understand it. Don't put anything up on your website that you don't understand. So if you, for example, don't do Facebook ads and you are looking at a template which talks about, using the visitors to your site, the cookies, using those for advertising purposes and so on, that's not relevant to you. And therefore, the reader, the person who does take a look at your policy, who is somebody who is concerned about privacy, they would be reassured to know that they're not going to be used for advertising purposes. So don't have those clauses in your privacy policy just because they're standard clauses if they don't apply to you. So take a little bit of time over it and just get a template that matches what you do and where you understand every term that you're putting through. And if you are having difficulty even after that, do write to us at the support desk and I'm sure we'll be able to help. That's info@allianceindependentauthors.org.
All right. And Ray chimed in and says he finds Termly for sites very good. So that's the name of a service, Termly.
Okay, so great. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for the recommendation. All right. Our next question is from Paulette. And the question is, I've heard conflicting information about how Amazon credits authors for pre-orders. Some saying that they are credited at the moment of sale, others saying that they accumulate and are credited during week 1. How does Amazon handle pre-orders, Orna?
So they're not all credited together is essentially how Amazon handles pre-orders. There was a time, the reason you're getting conflicting information is because it changed over time. So they will be credited at the point of purchase, but not all credited on the first, on the day when the book actually goes up for sale. So unlike some other providers who do it that way.
Yeah, unfortunately. So
unfortunately,
yep, so that's kind of that's kind of the downside with Amazon pre-orders. That's why I don't do them, for example. Because you're really not, you can definitely get onto some of their visibility lists, like hot new releases, or I forget what it's called now. But that may not be helpful for you. So that's why I don't do pre-orders. Now, pre-orders on other vendors like Apple makes a lot of sense because they're the opposite. All your pre-orders count on day 1. But yeah, that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, it's a straight
okay.
and disappointing answer.
Yeah, it's straight disappointing. Yeah, exactly. But we just give the facts on this podcast, right? All right. This question is from Rhonda. And this is a perennial question that we're getting, and I just happen to love. We're going to be publishing other authors' work as well as our own. We were told that we should consider professional indemnity insurance also known as liability insurance, in case someone takes offense at something in our books. Does ALLi recommend any companies or any advice?
I'm going to hand you over to Michael for the advice, but ALLi doesn't recommend specific companies, because we're a global organization and companies don't operate on a global basis. So you would have to check out with your local writers organization. They might be able to recognize, or your genre association. Your national or local writers organization might be able to recommend somebody who has a good reputation with authors in your arena, but we don't make recommendations on insurance at all. But Michael knows a lot about this topic and has some good general advice to offer.
Yeah, I can offer general advice. I can't offer companies either. But what I would say is it depends on your country. So the thing that people are concerned about, here's why you would want to buy insurance. You would want to buy insurance because there's something in your book that causes some sort of defamation to someone else, right? So you write a book, you say something about someone, and it causes them to suffer a harm in terms of people not buying their books anymore, or people thinking something about them that may not be true. And so they sue you for the injury to their reputation. It's also what we call personal injury. All right, that's what people are primarily afraid of. So that's why they go and get insurance for this sort of thing. For authors, it's recommended, but it's not something that historically has been done, not because it shouldn't be done, but because it's kind of new for authors. Now, your traditional publisher can go off and get what's called a media liability policy, and that covers them for pretty much anything that they publish. If there's any kind of blowback from any of the material that's in their books, it will protect them, essentially. All right. For authors, you can go off and purchase media liability policies, but they are very expensive. So there are companies, depending on where you live, that offer what's called professional liability insurance for authors. And what that is it's kind of a mix between it'll pay for some of your personal injury stuff, and then it'll also pay for some additional things. So you may see it referred to as author's professional liability, author's errors and omissions, or author liability policies. What people should not do, and again, this is advice from my friends in the U.S. and I'm fairly certain, because I have contacts in the U.K. and Australia, that this would also apply. You are not looking for a general liability policy. So, like, if you go to your local hometown insurance agent, the policy they sell you is not going to do anything for you for your books, because it excludes exactly what I just talked about. So you need a very specific author related insurance policy if you're going to do it. And if you're going to do it, be prepared to pay, because it's going to be expensive, and it is something you're going to have to pay for every year. So just make sure that you understand that. And then also, another thing I'll throw in, there's certain types of genres that if you write, you cannot get insurance for. So, for example, true crime, memoirs, autobiographies, anything where you're writing about real people, you're probably going to get kicked to the curb, because they're not going to. Those are the most risky type of writing to insure, and so insurance companies are not going to want to go on a limb for you. But if you're just writing your average fantasy novel, sure, you can probably get pretty cheap rates. But again, it's just make sure you understand what you're getting into. Make sure you get a copy of the policy to understand what you're getting. And if you don't understand what you're reading, try to reach out to someone who understands it, because that's kind of everything with this right now, because it's still kind of the Wild West right now. There really aren't that many authors that are purchasing insurance. And so until there are more, it's going to continue to be kind of a Wild West. But as far as, do I recommend it? Yeah, if you can afford it, and if you feel that it's something you have an exposure on, that's what you want to do. But just keep in mind, you can't purchase insurance. If you knowingly write something that's slandering someone or libeling someone, you cannot purchase insurance to pay for that. They're going to exclude that. Insurance is going to pay for accidental things that just happen to come about that you didn't foresee. Long answer, but I hope there's something in there for you.
Yeah, it's important. And then this particular questioner is going to be publishing other people's books. So probably needs insurance more than the average author. And yeah, it's the typical thing with insurance. The more you need it, the less likely you are going to be able to get it, or the more expensive it's going to be.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
That's just the way it is.
Yes.
So yes, it's a new thing. As authors become publishers, we take on responsibilities, even as individuals, and certainly for publishing other people, that traditionally publishers have had to bear on behalf of authors. So it's one to, if you're concerned, I would say, and if you're publishing other people, and certainly if you're publishing in certain genre, you need to make sure you're protected if you can.
Right. And insurance companies have not caught up to that yet. Like I still don't think that they really understand what we do.
Nope.
And so you've always got that. And I say that because I'm an insurance executive and I handle liability, oversee liability. I understand this stuff, and they just don't have a clue. There are some small companies out there that get it. But this whole author publisher thing, let's go. I'm going to be an author and then I'm going to publish a bunch of other authors. They don't understand that. And it's still very new to them. So it's just something we have to keep in mind.
Yeah.
All right.
You're the man for that question for sure.
Yep. So next question is from Lyndon. And Lyndon asks, if you were to spend $500 US in a service to promote your book or build a... Okay. I'm sorry, I misread the question. If you were to spend $500 in using a service to promote your book and build a simple website with direct selling, who would be the most effective service provider for this? So it's kind of a two-pronged question. If you had $500 to promote your book and if you had $500 to build a website and implement direct sales, let's just say that.
Yeah,
who would you use, Orna? Sorry, I'm struggling with that question. That's just
I understand why you're struggling with the question, because to be honest, the budget's not sufficient. It's certainly not sufficient for all the things that are in there, because to get a transactional website up and running, nobody's going to do that for you. Nobody's going to be able to do that for you at $500 probably, unless you're bringing a lot of the stuff yourself. And the other thing is, it's impossible to recommend one service that covers every kind of author. And this is so often these questions come back to, it depends on what you're doing and where you're doing it and how you're doing it and what kind of books you're selling, and and so on and so forth, as to how many books you have, all of that kind of thing. The cheapest and easiest way to get a transactional website up and running is probably WordPress with WooCommerce, but you are going to have to bring to that, if you're trying to get it for that kind of money, you're going to have to bring an awful lot of time. So either you need to get a bigger budget if you want to use a service, and in that case I would recommend that you look at ALLi's directory and database of approved services, and you will see people in there who will set these things up for you. But nobody is going to be able to do all the things that you've mentioned in your question for that kind of budget. So it's just not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, if you implemented some of that stuff yourself, maybe, right? Because you're gonna have to pay for hosting, and most places, I mean, you can go a little lower, but I pay on average about $250 for my hosting and domains every year. I've got multiple domains, so maybe it'd be less for other people, but that's about what I pay. So that's half of your budget right there going toward domains and hosting. And then you've also got to purchase a theme for, if you go WordPress, a theme for your WordPress site. That's going to cost you additional money. right? So the one I pay for is Divi. I think it's $89 per year. I got mine on a I got mine to where I don't have to pay per year. So, you're looking at $89 there. There's more of your money. And then if you wanted to do a simple integration, I mean, WooCommerce is what Orna recommended, and it's probably what I would recommend too if you really wanted to do it right. But if you wanted to implement something like a Gumroad or a PayHip, then you wouldn't necessarily have to pay anything up front to do that, but you would just have to make sure that you know how to install it on your website. So if you did all that stuff yourself, maybe you could do it. But I don't think you could pay someone to set all that up for you for that budget.
The other thing I would say, and always with authors, it's about trying to do things in the most inexpensive way, and that's completely understandable, especially when you're starting out, because we're not making a lot of money with our books, especially at the start, and it's when we most need to invest in setup. But having a return on investment mentality rather than a keeping this as cheap as possible mentality generally generates more success. So if somebody is thinking about going into business in a cafe, for example, they have to buy tables and chairs, rent premises, get in staff, do a whole load of things. They budget for that, plus pay themselves for 2 years or whatever. They budget for that, they set it up, they work out how many meals are going to sell, and what point in time they'll break even, and all of that kind of thing. I don't see a lot of authors doing that. I see a lot of authors saying, just I want to do this as cheaply as possible. And that's not, generally speaking, a great business plan. What happens there is it can take years to get to the point of profit, whereas, paradoxically, if you want to put it that way, actually investing more money at the beginning and thinking about things like break even and how many books you need to sell, it concentrates the mind to be realistic about what the expenses are ongoing and what you're likely to have to do. So these are business skills, business planning skills, which authors generally don't tend to lean towards. And it may be worth thinking. So just taking the question, way out of what you actually asked, but just to say it might be worth investing in a business planning course, which would enable you to approach this in a slightly different way, because trying to do everything as cheaply as possible is a recipe for putting in an awful lot of your own time. And then where does the writing come in? How do you produce the books? How do you get up and running and selling quickly if you're going to be putting in a huge amounts of time just in the getting set up and probably exhausted at the end of it all? So yeah, have a think about that too.
Yeah, and it comes back to you got to spend money to make money, right? And yes, there is a danger of going too far down that path. I think authors either they fall into three camps. So the people that get it, and then there are the people that they just want to do everything as cheaply as possible, like Orna mentioned, and then there's the people who don't want to do anything, and then they overspend. They'll go off and spend $10,000 to get a website. We're not saying to do that, but we're just saying it as a business, you have to understand how to operate a business. And one of the things that I've always said when I was building my own websites, and when I say build, I mean use a WordPress theme, is how can I create a website that runs itself, and it runs like a clock, so that the only things I have to worry about are the basic maintenance. So the only time I'm ever on my website is when I have a new book and I'm uploading that book, or when I need to make a change or some sort of special announcement. Other than that, I trust my website to kind of do what it needs to do, and it's always working, it's always operating. And I check in every few months just to make sure things are good. But that's really where you want to be with your author website. It should not be something that's taking up a huge time suck.
Correct.
So you just want to make sure you invest in a theme that can do that for you and lower your maintenance costs.
Great.
All right. Well, that was
Okay.
our final question.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes, because we're running out of time. I was just getting anxious there. Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
We've
we
gone
are out of
over
time.
time. Yeah, we are out of time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, it's
yes,
our
that was
final one of the year. So
it's always a bumper issue, and it was great, and lots of great questions. And thank you guys, and thank you everybody for sending in your really good questions. And thank you, Michael, for being there all through 2021. To answer the questions so well. And our next session will be the second Tuesday in January. So we'll be back then. Whole new year, whole new set of questions, and lots of interesting things happening in the author space. So do stay tuned. And in the meantime, wishing you all a wonderful holiday. Have a rest. Don't forget to take some creative rest, people, and have some downtime, and hopefully enjoy some writing and publishing too. Take care now. Bye-bye.
take care, everyone.